we'll start with me. We just kind of want to start out with why you're interested in our position and why you applied to be the superintendent here at Morley Stanwood.
Okay, well, I will tell you probably the most enjoyable administrative job I've had thus far was in Pittsburgh. And I think that's because both professionally and personally, I was garnering benefits that were enjoyable to me. Pittsburgh's a smaller town in southern Michigan, and I will tell you, to this point in my life, it'll be the best job I've never had. Again, I'm hoping that Morley Stanwood would be the best job I'll ever have, period. But I, as an educator, really like the interaction with kids. And in that building, my office was between the elementary building and the secondary building. And I was able to walk down past the gym and interact with kids. And if I was tired of dealing with finances, I could walk down and pat kindergartners or first graders on the head and see what they were doing. And it still left me in contact with the kids. I miss that now. I don't, very rarely do I get that kind of interaction. And I think the smaller type district would allow me that opportunity to be more personal and one-on-one with kids. We all want a legacy when we retire in some infinite number of years out there. And I would like my legacy to be that I developed relationships with kids and made an impact on their education and on their lives. I don't think I'm doing that currently.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My turn.
Okay, Don. I get it right?
You done good.
Okay, I'll try to keep it up.
What have you learned about our district, and do you have some suggestions for creating a specific direction for our district based on what you know?
Yeah, well, you know, obviously I got online, looked at the finances, looked at the annual report, of course, spent time driving around the community and looking around. First thing I've noticed, your buildings are exceptional. Your grounds crew and your janitors should be commended, because I was absolutely impressed with how they look. And that, I'll tell you, my wife also said, well, they do a really good job with their buildings. And you do, and that's fantastic. Looking online, you know, we have some issues that we need to address as far as AYP at the high school and at the alternative ed building. I don't think there's a magic stick that we can just wave and correct those things. It's gonna take work. You're gonna have to, you know, get in, look at the data, look at where we're weak curriculum-wise, try to fill those gaps in our curriculum. When I looked at, you know, obviously subgroups, you're pretty non-diverse here, for lack of any other way of saying it, but subgroups weren't an issue, and in certain districts they are. That's not the case here in Morley that I saw, at least in your annual report. And so it's really a matter, as far as I could tell, the elementary seem to be doing pretty well, the middle schools seem to be doing pretty well. When I looked at standardized test scores, we got a pretty good glut in the middle. We could stand to move those people who are at level 2, those students, to level 1, or, you know, gain more proficiency. I don't think we were a traditional bell curve when I looked at it. Plans to change that, like I said, you utilize the data as an instructional tool and do gap analysis, and, you know, it might be something really simple. Maybe we're not teaching fractions when the kids are being tested and we're doing it afterwards. Well, if we're okay with that, we just need to understand the kids aren't going to be good at it, but look at the data and see what's going on. Financially, you know, it looks like you guys are trying to be very prudent with your monies. But you're like a lot of other people in the state, we don't have a lot in reserve here. That's not uncommon, and it'll unfortunately be less uncommon if the legislature gets their way. And I'm assuming, like everywhere else that has, you know, less than 10% fund equity, the low-hanging fruit's already been picked. So the challenge is, when the governor makes a proposal to permanently reduce the per pupil allocation, where do you come up and balance the budget? And I don't think there's an easy answer to that either, and it's nothing to do with Morley or any other school in the state. We're at a crisis in Michigan regarding funding for public education, and we have kicked the can down the road 1 year further for far too long, and now we're at the edge of the cliff. We're not gonna be alone here in that regard, but we're gonna have an uphill battle like everyone else in balancing the budget and solving our problems.
Very good. I'm up next.
All right, Dennis?
All right. Okay, what's your opinion on the superintendent to board communication, and how do you plan to implement effective communication with us all?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. I think weekly, in my past and in my current position, I create a board packet that I take to the Board of Education's home, usually every Thursday or Friday, depending on what meetings are planned and that type of thing. And in that, I put information that I think is pertinent for the board to know. It could be, these students did great on this, we're having an issue with an employee here, so-and-so won an award. Anything that involves the school family that I think is pertinent. And maybe follow up on other issues that were sent in our earlier board packets. So I always have done that line of communication first. Secondly, it depends on the situation. If unfortunately we had a student, say, come to the building inebriated, that, once we deal with the student and the issue and the family, and involve law enforcement if appropriate, which in that case it would be, then it's a phone call, so that you guys know. My goal is not to blindside you, and I hope your goal is not to blindside me. And in that way, we're sharing communication back and forth, that you're informed when someone comes to you, and yet I'm informed when somebody questions what's going on in the district, and why would you make that decision and that type of thing. So it allows me either to contact the individual, or at least be aware that they're gonna come to the next board meeting and have questions about it, so I'm prepared. So I see that communication as a two-way street. I'm not real big on email correspondence with the board.
Darrell is our anti-email.
You are.
guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't even have it.
I don't know that that's bad. It's not that email isn't great for speed and ease of communication. I just think you lose the face-to-face, nonverbal communication that sometimes tells more to the story than what you get in the written word, and especially in email. That would be my last choice, to be honest. I'd much rather have a phone call with each of you than to have an email conversation.
Okay.
What is your history of curricular and instructional improvement, and how would you lead our district forward in those areas?
Well, I said earlier when, what I had done to look into the district a little bit, and curriculum-wise, the state is dictating to us what's going to happen. I think that's very unfortunate. We're have lost local control as far as what graduation requirements, as far as what the state mandated curriculum is. But I don't think that game's gonna change in the near future at all. My concern is that those decisions, along with the financial impact that is looming, have effectively limited opportunities for kids in vocational areas, and I'm afraid that across the state you're gonna see it in the arts and the whatever extra that we have. We're required by law to do the state mandated curriculum. And if all you can afford is a state mandated curriculum, we're in my opinion, cheating kids. Now, to get to the root of your question, because I digress there, I really like the professional learning communities model, where you sit down and work collaboratively and share ideas and utilize data to inform your decision-making. And that's not done by one person. That has to be modeled, obviously, by me, but it involves many groups. We in Hastings started a committee of community members. We refer to it as the Committee of 33. It wasn't my idea. I stole it from a couple of parents who came to me and said, my parents used to be on this committee. And at any rate, the Thursday before the board meeting, we sit down and I go through the board agenda with the members of the Committee of 33, and they ask questions. I unfortunately email them earlier in the week and say, hey, if you have any things you want added to the agenda, let me know so I can include it. And we usually get 2 or 3 items that people say, well, I'll give you an example. Last month, one lady came in, and bless her heart, I was really nervous. I made sure the AD was there, but she wanted to know about the Title IX problems in the athletic program. And right away I'm thinking, that's what we need. I didn't want that at all. Well, what it turned out to be was the boys' varsity basketball coach has put up a records board. And she wanted to know why there wasn't a girls' records board, which was a fair question, but I was much more afraid that there would be more to it than that. But utilizing that model and involving others in the discussion, so one, they go and tell other people. And professional learning communities is virtually the same type of thing. You share, you look at the data, you talk about why you come up with a solution, what's the best avenue of attacking it. We're going to, and rightfully so in my opinion, I've taught to every test I ever gave. Because I taught the curriculum, I thought the kids should know. Now the state is telling us what the curriculum is, and they're testing us on that. And if we're failing in that area, then we need to look at where we're failing. And it shouldn't be me sitting down and going through information. It should be a team of us sitting down and looking at the information and saying, why is that? And hashing it out and coming up with what we think is a solution to the problem and implementing it. So curriculum's ever changing. And in my opinion, we compress way too much of it. We ask more of our older kids, but we delete nothing and we just push it downward. And it's to the point now where, little kids are doing concepts that we didn't do when we were little kids. And I'm not so sure that's the greatest thing in the world. I can tell you, and I harp on it, and my wife will shake her head, but I tell my daughter, who's a 4th grader, you need to learn your times tables. You need to learn your times tables, over and over and over, because I know math will be easier for her later if she does. But they don't do times tables like we once used to do. And it becomes much harder for them, I think, as they get older, because they don't have that foundation. So looking at where we're weak and trying to make it better, and I talk way too long on it.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Well, I guess I'm next on the list here.
Okay,
How would you use the current and potential district financial resources to deal with the obvious financial crisis here in Michigan?
well, we have a mission to educate kids and hopefully turn out productive citizens that, are lifelong learners and can enjoy their life. And if they move in next door, we're happy to have them as neighbors. When we look at the budget situation, we still have to honor our mission, and that is to educate those kids. So you try to stay away from the classroom when you're allocating resources. If we know, as an example, that, geez, we really need to put some money into, say, a math curriculum or an English language arts curriculum, that's state mandated. So when we allocate the funds and we know we have that area that we need to cover, we need to dedicate our resources to meet our mission. Unfortunately, and that's what I was saying a little bit, or touched on earlier about vocational and the arts programs, they aren't mandated curriculum as I would like to see them be. And when you have limited resources, I think what are outstanding programs for kids become threatened because they aren't mandated that you have to do them. Doesn't mean they're not good for kids, because they absolutely are. But you try to stay away from the classroom. You try to do the things that least impact students and our mission into teaching them and educating them. I sometimes wish my career would have started right after Proposal A, because it would have been a lot easier. But, you know, now, we have a lot of hard choices. And I think we've got to put kids first in our decision-making and dictating where our resources will go.
I was just thinking, hi Richard.
Hi, Cindy.
What do you think is your greatest administrative personal strength, and how would it help the Morley Stanwood school system?
Well, getting too comfortable. I think, personal administrative strength, I think is in finance. I think I've done a good job with that, in other districts. I can't say I really like it, but it is a huge part of the superintendency, and so if you're not good at it in today's economic climate, you're going to be negatively spending and in trouble in a hurry. I think that's a bonus. I do enjoy the part of the budgeting side that involves talking to my colleagues and saying, all right, what are you hearing? Talking to legislators and saying, you know, this isn't fair, or this is how it will impact us. That part of it I enjoy. Right up until the time where you know, the rubber hits the road, and this is the pie you have, and you know 80 to 85% of it are fixed costs, and now you've got 15% that you can deal with and try to shuffle around. Up until then, it's okay. But that's when it becomes real, and that's when it impacts kids and the lives of others in the school family that are negative. So I like it from there, but later I don't like it. But it's necessary currently. You know, other strengths, I think I'm pretty well networked, that I can talk to other people. I don't have just one person I can call. I'm fortunate to have a number of colleagues or former colleagues that are currently superintendents throughout the state that I can call, get their opinions on different things and bounce ideas off them. I find that to be an asset to me, as well as personally an outlet for me, because we can just kind of shake our heads together and say, what is going on? And at least in that regard, I don't feel like I'm alone. I think that's a bonus. Bottom line is, I think I care about kids. I think that's a huge strength of mine, that it doesn't matter when I was coaching years ago or today, when I walk through the building, if a kid says, hello, Mr. Satterlee, that tickles me. You know, that kid knows me. At some point, I apparently gave that kid a high five, or I patted that kid on the head. I did something to make an impact on that kid's day that was hopefully positive, and the kid remembered it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a next question for you.
Okay?
You come into the office on Monday morning and you have 3 complaints, one from a staff member, one from a parent, and one from a board member. How would you prioritize how you respond to those complaints?
Well, do I get to hear the nature of the complaint?
They're all worst-case scenario.
It does make a difference, and Kurt is exactly right. If the parent complaint is something about, you know, my kid was at the bus stop and the bus driver clipped him with the door on the way by, that's moving up my list pretty high. Yeah, if it's, you know, know, something that, all right, that can wait 20 minutes, then, but we always have a moving target, and the pots are bubbling all over the stove, and you have to deal with the one that is most urgent. So I'm not trying to be evasive. I simply need to know, all right, why did Mr. So-and-so call? Why did Mr. Barnes call? And what is up with the faculty member? Okay, and now I may have some history on those issues to help me sort it out, I may have no history. But based on the facts at hand, what one do I think is gonna overflow the quickest? That's the one I'm gonna deal with. Now, they all get done before I go home, but that's how I would sort them out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm up again.
Okay?
All right. What is one strategy you would have for working with our district to help make AYP and all?
Again, I don't think there's a magic bullet, okay? One, I have to have familiarity with the district, what we are or are not doing curriculum-wise. But, you know, I'm not gonna go anywhere where I don't wanna be the best there is. That's my personal opinion. Not that I'll make it, because I might not, but I think we all have to have goals, and being at the top of the list is my goal. And that would be my goal for this school district. But it's using our resources that are here to look at the curriculum we have, to look at our test scores, and lay them down together and say, all right, all of our kids are messing up in ELA and comprehension. Why? What are we doing wrong? And look at ourselves. Sometimes that's a hard look in the mirror, you know? And are we really focusing on the curriculum? I was guilty as a teacher. I enjoyed certain areas of the curriculum more than others. And maybe I spent, and I'm sure I did, way too much time on the certain areas I enjoyed. You know, 15 years down the road, I recognize I shortchanged those kids by maybe not exposing them to information they should have had. I don't think teachers do that intentionally, but if we notice it going on, we've got to go and talk to them. There's a multitude of reasons why, but being willing to sit down, talk about it, collaborate, and try to solve the problem as part of the process, I think is how I would handle that situation. I know I would.
Good answer. Thank you.
How can a superintendent make themselves more effective with community involvement? And do you have an example of any community involvement leadership skills that you have?
Well, I gave the example of Committee of 33 earlier. That's something, if I were hired by this board, I would institute here. And I will tell you, for me, it is a lot more fun than a board meeting. Because board meetings are business meetings. And so typically, at least in my experience, the dialogue going back and forth is limited. At the Committee of 33 meeting, I'm able to sit down and actually spend an hour, hour and a half, and answer questions and talk about concerns and say, no, that's not why we did that. Here's why we did it. To me, that's actually an enjoyable exchange of information. I have a board member that sits on that committee from prior to being a board member. She says the same thing. She enjoys that part of it more than she does going to the board meeting. So that's certainly one way I would attempt to involve the community. You know, that's a tough question, because, you know, visibility is a huge thing. Stop by the coffee shop, you know, when you're stopping to get a pop in the morning, stop at the local gas station. Do things where people can see you. And visibility is wonderful, but in my opinion, you've got to be approachable too. You can be as visible as you want, but if people think they're gonna get nowhere in speaking to you, that they think you're not listening to them, that their wishes aren't being heard, it's not gonna matter. I can stand outside all day long, every day, and people are just gonna drive by. They have to feel comfortable in speaking to you. So I think visibility and approachability go hand in hand. And in doing so, in working with people, you know, restate what their concern is. A lot of times they just want to be heard. And if they feel like you're just a blank face and you're not listening, then they don't feel heard. So give dialogue back, listen to what they're saying, repeat what they said, and if you tell them you're gonna get back with them, get back with them. There's nothing more frustrating than when you don't respond back to them. So that's how I would try to handle it.
Thank you.
Do you have experience working with grants? And how can a district our size maximize a grant's potential?
I think it's difficult, I'll be honest with you. Do I have experience working with grants? Certainly. I mean, almost every school budget has some, obviously, grants in there. Looking for private grants and that type of thing is becoming harder, and more cumbersome to complete. But I think you have to be diligent and try to find opportunities that Morley Stanwood would fit in the niche to qualify for a grant. I will say, I think a few years ago it was much easier than it is today. Now, you do have some business partners, and I don't know if they provide grants or not. I would think they're supportive of the school. You don't know?
Well,
Not sure.
a lot.
Okay, well, I think then, you try to cultivate that relationship. One of the things we did in Hastings a few years ago, because each building has a business partner, we have a board member who is, he has what he calls the Saxon Spirit Bus. And at every football game, one of the local businesses will, and some basketball games, but it gets too cold, some of the local businesses, one of them, will sponsor the hot dog bus. And he has a grill about the size of that table, and he does 1 million hot dogs, and the employees from that business come in and give away chips and the hot dog and have lemonade, and it's for free. And people from both sides come in and they go through there and that type of thing. Well, what we did is to thank our business partners. We went out and one day at each business in the spring and fed their employees. And it actually was an absolute blast. We took kids from the building that were, if it was Hastings Manufacturing with our middle school, they sat down together. But that helped strengthen that tie and foster that relationship with the business partners. But I got away from your grant question anyways. Anything we do today, whether it's the state mandates or some federal mandates, everything takes time. Grant writing is the same thing. But you have to put in the time to turn in the application and try to get the grant. I think the niche is limited though. Thank you.
Catch your breath, man?
Can I take a drink?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, Darrell,
You ready?
I'm ready.
What are your long-term and short-term personal and professional goals?
Well, if you look at my resume, I've bounced around the state and I'm growing awful tired of it, I can tell you that. I would like to find a place where I could settle down. I see at least 8 more years before I can retire. I don't know if my heart can handle 8 more years of this economy and being a superintendent, but that's what I foresee having as a minimum. Professionally, when I'm done, I'm pursuing my doctorate. I would like to teach at the college level part-time when I want to, not because I have to. Just so I don't feel like I'm really retired, but I am. So those would be some professional goals. Personally, my wife and I will celebrate 25 years of marriage this,
August.
15.
That was close.
Yeah, very good.
I'll get there.
That was the hardest question he got. Wasn't it? He gave it to himself.
All right, quiet down, ladies. One up again, but anyways, I would like to see our kids grow, personally during that time, and us continue to grow old together and you know, move into later life and be able to be in a position where we can enjoy it. That personally would be something I would, you know, hope will happen.
Richard,
Yes, sir.
do you have any experience in collaborative efforts with other local districts or ISDs?
Both. I will say this for, Berry Intermediate School District is one of the two smallest school districts in the state. They have exactly two local districts, Hastings and Dalton. And as such, they really have limited income and opportunity to service us. They recognized that a long time ago and were able to attach Berry Intermediate to Calhoun Intermediate and Branch Intermediate in a consortium where we share curriculum directors and experts in the various fields to come in and work with our faculties and staffs on different areas. That has been, as a superintendent, very rewarding because when we sit down once a month, there will be 25 superintendents sitting around the table, and it gives you, you know, even though you might be having a rotten discussion, you know you're not alone in the discussion, and you're able to chit-chat at breaks and that type of thing. So for me, professionally, that's been rewarding. I think it's benefited our two local districts immensely because we cannot afford the personnel that they can afford to share with us amongst the whole group. This school year, we had a longtime food service director retire at the end of last year, and we have gone together with Maple Valley Schools and we are sharing one food service director. Now, we've experienced growing pains with that, which I think are natural. You're always going to have them. The longer the employee, our gentleman Earl had been there for 35 years. So he had done the same thing, the same way. I don't think the menu changed for forever. And the people that worked for him knew what the expectations were. Well, the new girl has experienced some growing pains with the employees mostly, because it's a change for their work environment, and anytime you change, it's difficult. Those are two examples of collaboration. Now, having said that, we don't have a choice. We have a finite amount of resources. We still have the same mission to educate our kids, and it's not going to get better. And collaboration between districts and between ISDs and between locals and ISDs is going to happen, whether it's in the payroll area or if it's consolidated busing or pick your poison. We have to do it to be able to maintain what it is we're supposed to do in educating kids.
Thank you.
We're in an era of increased accountability in all areas. How would you plan to implement accountability within our district for teachers, parapros, bus drivers?
Well, you know, I highly doubt any of the teachers, the bus drivers, or the parapros get up in the morning and shower and think, yeah, I hope I can mess with so-and-so today or not get the job done today. For the most part, everyone I've ever worked with really wants to do a good job. They might not always know how to get there. And depending on the situation, I might be a cheerleader, patting them on the back, encouraging, but always saying, this is where we need to go. And try to lead them down that path. Now, unfortunately, there comes a time when maybe someone just doesn't want to go down the path. Doesn't matter how hard you try, and then you deal with that circumstance individually. To me, that's the exception, not the rule. You know, the expectations, I think, have grown for all of us. And the demands, I think, are harder than ever. And when we work with an employee, regardless of what area of the school district, I think we need to keep that in mind. At one point, we hired that employee because we believed in that employee and we thought that employee would be good to work with our kids. I think we have an obligation then, if that isn't working out, to work with that employee until they show us they can't do it. I think that's only fair too.
What are some of your strategies with dealing with contract negotiations?
Well, I've had the good fortune or the misfortune, depending on how you look at it, to sit on negotiation teams when I was principal in Houghton Lake, and I've negotiated contracts with all labor groups in Hastings and all labor groups in Pittsburgh. I've seen collaborative, target-specific bargaining, and I've seen it be adversarial bargaining. I think the key is that when you sit down with the other side, they need to know you're telling the truth, and you need to know they're telling the truth. And that we have to have some semblance of what the real picture is financially. And if we can agree upon the numbers, then let's look at what we need to do. It's getting harder and harder, because that pie is shrinking. And it's not that our employees don't deserve an increase, not that they don't warrant, A, B, and C as far as benefits. It's just harder to pay for. That's the bottom line. And in that part of it, and I saw the kind of upward down smile, it is difficult because they truly are doing a good job impacting kids and making a difference in the lives of our students, but we still have only this much pie. So to me, you start with the numbers. If you can get agreement there, you try to move forward. Has to be collaborative, if at all possible. I've told every board I've worked for, we can get anything out of a contract you want. You just gotta pay for it. And it's very difficult. You're welcome.
My turn.
Okay,
How would you ensure that any budget cuts, and you did touch on this a little bit, which would have to be made, would have the least impact on the classroom instruction? I mean, what are some things that you can foresee just to help stay away from the classroom?
well, I can, I run the gamut. When I got in Hastings, they had about $300,000 in the bank on a $24 million budget, which is worse than the shape you guys are in right now, or at least what was pictured in the annual report in the financial part. I recommended closing a building down there so that we didn't have singleton courses where we had, not singleton courses, but mixed grade levels where we had kindergartners and first graders in a singleton classroom, rather than having doubles, 2 first grades, 2 second grades. That building would have been a K1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4 building, and was very costly. I'll tell you, that's one of the worst decisions I'll ever make as an educator as far as impact on kids. It was purely a financial decision. That's one example. Obviously you deal with layoffs, and that's very unpleasant. When in the current contract I deal with, we have last day of school date that I have to notify employees whether they will be laid off or not. And you get to know some of these people, and now their kids in college, or they just bought this, or the husband got laid off, and you feel about that high when you have to walk in and talk to them. It isn't fun, but you still try to stay away from the mission of educating kids. And when you talk about classroom teachers or parapros, extracurriculars, all those things we all look at, they all have an impact somewhere on kids. You just try to stay as far away from the core curriculum as you can.
with our list of questions. and-
Holy smokes, I talk
But-
fast.
No, we're not
You're
done.
We're not done.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna need another drink.
Right.
It's round two.
We, you know, I had mentioned that we'd all looked over your resume
Yes.
and letter, and so, some of us, I'm sure, have picked out some different things that we wanted to ask about, so we'll, you know, kind of go that route now.
Absolutely.
Anybody have something?
I'll start. I just want you to expand on your committee of 33 as
Sure.
far as who's on that committee. I know you mentioned yourself and one other board member, but who's on that committee and what is your goal or mission with that committee?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the goal or the mission. The complaint, and you hear it all the time, is that the community doesn't have a forum to air their concerns and get dialogue back and forth. Well, my wife has a friend, was bailing me out, but anyways, she called me with, actually two friends, and the two friends said, you know, when I was young, because they're from Hastings, lived there their whole life. When I was young, my parents were on this committee, we'd like to talk to you about it. So they did. And I was fortunate enough that the superintendent that started this program 30, 40 years ago is still alive, and his son was one of my board members. So I got a hold of Dick Gunter, and he and I sat down and we talked about, all right, why did you start this committee back in the day? And it was at the time when, and Dick is a wonderful gentleman, but anyways, it was during the time when the little one-room schoolhouses were being closed down and they were bringing those kids into town. And the parents there, they wanted them informed. Well, the way they broke down the district was in 33 parts, or 11 parts, excuse me, based on where the one-room schoolhouses were and the precincts were. And then they had the meeting of the original 11 and said to them, we want you to bring 2 people back next time. Okay? And the thought was that Mrs. Jones might be more willing to go and talk to her neighbor if she knew who was on the committee of 33, as opposed to coming and talking to me. So Mrs. Jones talks to the lady on the committee of 33. She comes to me on the Thursday before the board meeting and says, hey, I had a lady question about this. And I provide an answer, and Mrs. Jones goes back out and comments on it. That's how it functions, or is at least supposed to function. We have struggled to keep 33 members, and the committee keeps evolving. If somebody doesn't show up 2 or 3 times, hey, do you want to be on the committee anymore? No, I can't. Joe has soccer on that night. All right? Who else do we invite then? Trying to keep, the thing alive. I think it makes a difference solely because the message is getting from my office outward. That, at least these individuals have heard the true story, and if they're at the restaurant, somebody says, well, I don't know why they're doing that. Well, here's why. And can try to get out factual information.
I'm curious about, it sounds like, Hastings is a little bit bigger than us,
Mhm.
but then you've also been in some smaller districts. What are the challenges of a larger district over a district our size? Or, what would be a benefit of coming here to a smaller?
Well, the challenges are the same. I just don't know if there's as many targets moving. We still have the financial issues. We still have to make AYP, so many of the challenges are the same. But when you involve more people, you have more conflict. And I think that maybe is a little bit of an advantage. I said earlier, I want to be able to be around kids a little bit. That to me is a huge advantage.
Great.
At one point in time, one of our elementaries had as many as 70 free and reduced kids. We have an issue with poverty, in the working poor, so to speak.
We have the same issue.
Yeah, and how do you deal with that? How, as a superintendent, what's the correct approach for all of that?
Is there a correct approach for all that?
I mean, obviously, we wanna try to get those kids educated and pull them out of that.
Absolutely.
But other than that, what's your feeling?
Well, those kids didn't create that circumstance, that's the first thing, and our job is to work with those kids. And I'm gonna toot my wife's horn here. She's, works with some, we also have a building that has very high economically disadvantaged clientele. To the point where this summer in that building, they qualified, we're gonna run a breakfast and lunch program for any students in the district 18 or younger. And it's needed. But a couple of ladies and then my wife joined in, started a sack lunch program at that building after school. And it started in that building 2 years ago with maybe 8 to 10 kids. And what they would do is get donations from the faculty and the staff, and anyone, I don't know how many juice pouches I probably bought. But at any rate, so those kids twice a week would have something to take home. And they tried to overpack those sack lunches because they knew there were siblings at home. And at least twice a week then, those kids had something. Because a lot of them are latchkey kids too, and they're just, it's unfortunate, but it's true. And that has grown to every building we have except the high school, and now services over 120 kids. And you don't have to ask. There's no financial requirement, you don't have to come in and show mom and dad only makes this much, or, yada yada. If you come in and say, hey, my kid really could use a sack lunch, they get one. We have businesses in town who now have donated thousands of dollars to the program to keep it going. Our faculty and staff still donate. We need to work with those kids, and that's how it's awful hard to sit down and learn times tables when you're hungry. And if we can give those kids the opportunity, expect the same of them as every student, but give them the same opportunity to walk in there with the advantages of every student, or as close as we can, I think we have to do.
In conjunction with that question, I've got another question.
Okay.
How you feel about, we have, pre-K situation here, and how do you feel about the early childhood and the significance and importance of it?
Well, it's huge. When we were talking next door about kids and technology, and this will just be an example to that, but my son is much more savvy at his age, unfortunately, about probably everything in the world, but in particular, technology. Because when I was that age, you had a rotor and 3 channels if the wind was blowing right. Now, the areas of multimedia that can come to him is just
Infinite.
it is. It's absolutely crazy. And you throw in how big a sponge little kids are, and how much they suck in early childhood and fill their head and they experience. We're missing the boat if we don't do something in that area when they're young. Now, having said that, is talk about staying away from the classroom. I'm hoping like crazy, I'm not optimistic, but I'm hoping we will be able to start our Young Fives program again this year. Because last year, the way Young Fives was funded, the program was in place, but we hadn't received any money yet by the time the proration came through. Well, okay, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but you're not paying me, and something's gotta give here. I have to make a cut somewhere. So, I didn't like it, but that was a cut. And I didn't like it because I personally think we're disservicing those younger kids. Having said that, I'm not required to educate those kids. So, you know, it's, I try to balance it, but it's unfair.
A change of no. Trying to change things off order.
Okay?
What do you, or what would you expect of your board members? What's your expectation?
Well, you know, you guys have your job to do as far as, you know, you hire and fire the superintendent, and you oversee the budget, and you make policy. I would ask that you stay out of the day-to-day operations, but feel free to come and ask me about it. You know what I'm saying? I don't want, you know, a bus driver coming and telling me that the dentist said, hey, no, I told you, you can't drive down that road anymore, there's too many potholes. All right, that's a day-to-day decision-making thing. I would expect that you're, you know, gonna be honest with me, as I would be with you. If I'm frustrated, I'm gonna come and say, hey, all right, I don't get it, what's going on? And I would ask that you would do the same with me. You know, that, if you have concerns, get a hold of me. That's what I would expect.
Not email.
In your cover letter, you had put that it has not been the professional environment I enjoy in regards to Hastings.
Yep.
Could you expand on that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. Hastings, and I don't wanna degrade them, because obviously they're my employer, but I wanna answer your question, okay? It is a difficult union. I think wonderful people, very hardworking, outstanding at giving. But it is a tough union, and it does have a difficult contract to deal with that is confined in budgetary areas, and, you know, it's been frustrating, okay? My first year there, we closed the building, okay? That stunk. My second year there, we negotiated, and that wasn't pleasant. It just seems like every year, the target that is coming up isn't a little target, it's like the storm cloud on the horizon. And I don't really see that going away there in the immediate future. I have some ideas I'll share with the board, especially as we enter the budget cycle, but I think it's gonna be a long, long, hard road.
I was wondering, in your resume, it lists that there was an implementation of the Student Responsibility Center
Mhm.
when you were at Holton Lake. Could you tell us a little about
And
that?
actually did it in Ionia as well. Try to use love and logic, and when a student makes a mistake, you know, as an assistant principal at that time, and then the high school principal in Holton Lake, you know, part of my job was that kids mess up, that's why they pay me. But I don't think kids, for the most part, mess up on purpose. So the intent was to try to teach them in a model that would, instead of just saying, all right, you're kicked out of school, or you are now in school, that when you go to in-school, you develop a plan so that the next time you're tardy, hopefully that plan kicks in and you'll hurry up and get to class. So that was the intent of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just to let you know, so you know.
Okay.
You're one of the first that I know that, has taught in Ionia, that's where I graduated from,
Really? What year?
1974.
And she-
1974.
I was born and raised in Ionia,
Well, no, where'd you live?
Nickel Plate Road.
Are you kidding me? Did you go to the nickel plate party store?
I just lived around the corner.
All right, there you go. No kidding.
Small world, huh?
Yes, it is.
Of course, we didn't have the big fancy school that you had, I think, when you was there. The high school was the junior high school. That was a junior high, high school combination. when I
That
was
is
in
correct, the
school.
one on Union Street.
But I started out in a little country school that you was talking about before, years ago, out on Nickel Plate Road. If you recall, that building was still there. The one-room school, and then they moved out to Rather, where they did the combo.
Yes,
They
yes,
started
they
doing
did.
that. He was talking
Wouldn't
about it
it-
earlier.
We're getting, I can talk to you about it in a minute, but I would thought you'd have went to Welch School, because there's a Welch School there too.
Yep.
It's neat.
Small world.
Yes.
Somebody else have other questions?
I had one here, you mentioned earlier that you, dealing with board members, you try not to get blindsided, or you would like that concept. Have you ever been blindsided, and how did you deal with it?
Well, we all get blindsided from time to time, you know, and one strength I have that I didn't bring up earlier is I think I can handle stressful situations without becoming overly anxious, for lack of a better term. When you're blindsided, that's generally what happens. Your stress level goes up and you know, need to take a deep breath and try to relax. An example of being blindsided per se, 2-3 months ago, I had a board member that indicated he would like to have some of the board members stay after, and I see you guys do this beforehand, which I think is a lot smarter than after, but stay after the meeting to just kind of chit chat with the community. And I think that's a great idea, but he never said a word to me about it. He just kind of blurted it out. That to me is somewhat blindsided. And I think it blindsided the other board members. Hey, maybe say something to me beforehand about it, let me know, just, you know, that type of thing. I will comment though on doing it before the meeting. One of the complaints I hear always is that we don't get a chance to talk to you before you vote. And we don't get a chance to talk after you vote. So, you know, obviously you have public comment in there, but the visitors that come to the board meeting have to be pretty astute to know, all right, that's coming up. I'm gonna have to say something on that during public comment, which is maybe way up here in the agenda, or I'd have to look at how you set your agenda up, or way down here. Because typically you only do it once. At least by doing it before the meeting, they have a chance to say, well, is there anything on there I should be concerned about? And have that dialogue before you vote on it. So I think that's actually a pretty good idea.
For what it's worth, here we've had it, we have one toward the top, and we do our vote thing, and then we've got one down at the bottom.
Do you?
You know, that's such a good change, I don't know. Well, we've talked about it, right?
Have you? I've never experienced that myself. I'm sure when things are running fine, it's not an issue, you know?
That's right.
I really, the last thing I was curious about, were the bond proposals that
Mhm.
you have been involved with. You could tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I had a few. I finished up when I was in Pittsburgh. They had a sinking fund that I finished up doing the work with, and oddly enough, it was at a time, and maybe it occurred here, I don't know, but we had well water there, and had two wells, and this occurred at a time when the feds changed the arsenic levels in per parts per billion that could be in your water, and we were going to replace one well. Well, we ended up replacing 2 wells because we had just a smidgen too much arsenic in it when they lowered the levels. And then we had to put in an arsenic removal system and all that kind of stuff. So that pretty much shot what was left of our sinking fund money, but we did get it done, thankfully. We had a ballot proposal for sinking fund in Hastings that failed. And then we had a qualified school construction bond that passed this last May. No, was it May or August? August, I believe it was. And what was a relatively close vote. It was only, you know, around 90 to 100 votes that it passed by. I think the difference between the sinking fund and the qualified school construction bond was that the CUSA did not, it was very low interest loans sponsored by the feds, and that was an easy sell. You're never gonna be able to borrow this money cheaper. And we tied classroom instructional technology to it for every building, and we tried projects at every building to it.
Okay.
And that got our parents to vote yes.
Great, great.
And we're just starting to get all our technology installed, it's incredible.
Changes fast too.
It does.